Like that? Okay. All right. It is now 6:30 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are a part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and the city of residence for the record. Also be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Hayden Champosi.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
King. Here. Schmid.
Here.
Chociej.
Here.
Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item that is not on our agenda tonight? Please note, public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do not see anyone in person. Is there anyone online? Sounds like no. We have one public presentation this evening regarding a CID petition for the Mission Mart Shopping Center from Laura Smith.
Good evening. You'll hear very briefly from me, just long enough for me to introduce Banks Floodman, who I think you're all familiar with, Sunflower Development Group, to share with you kind of some plans that they have for the Mission Mart shopping center and a potential creation of a community improvement district for that. So with that, I will invite Mr. Floodman to come up. He's got a PowerPoint presentation that we will walk through and share with you.
All right, thank you very much. Good to see everybody again. There we go, perfect. Yeah, so we are in discussions with the current owner, Steve Chociej. We are invested in the area. We love the area. Some people in our shop maybe too much, especially with the peanut there. But so we've looked at Mission Mart for years. I have a lot of respect for Steve Chociej and what he's done with Mission Mart over the last 39 years. But we do feel that there's an ability to take Mission Mart to the next level. Not just from a tenant perspective, that's not our objective. We're not going to do Plaza Part 2, where you are a big institutional buyer, you come in and you jam it with all these non-mom and pops. That is not the mentality we have with Mission Mart. It is a perfect shopping center for mom and pops, for local businesses that can be very, very successful. That being said, we do feel it is outdated on a lot of different levels, whether it may be a new roof or roofs in this case that needed, some TI for the existing tenants, a lot of landscaping, some rebranding. I think the Mission Mart, I love that. I think that would say similar, but I think it can be cleaned up, rebranded, website, a lot of the things that we think can drive even more interest in this area. So I'll kind of go through here, kind of what this is, just kind of the table of contents. We can go to the next slide here. If there's a way I can control it too, that might be no luck. Okay, perfect. You guys, everybody knows where it's at. You can go to the next slide here. 3 buildings, 129,000 feet of retail, over 70 years old, one of the buildings. So it's, I didn't realize that until we dove in a few months ago, but you know, to Steve's credit, he's done an incredible job of keeping that thing very, very, very clean. So the standards and the relationships with all the tenants is extremely important. And we have talked to all the tenants. We wouldn't be here having this conversation without having face-to-face dialogue with all the tenants as well. We can jump to the next slide. So this is one area, just as an example here, that we think should absolutely be a centerpiece and highlighted. And It's not right now. We think between the lighting, the color, the branding, the brick, the landscaping, those are all things that can make this area that much better, and take it to the next level from a destination perspective and highlight this kind of centerpiece. We can go to the next, oh, let me, one more thing. You know, this right here, we've got some renderings in here. We think that could be a really cool mural to kind of highlight old school Mission and kind of have an old school flair, but with some new school kind of facade enhancements. One thing you'll see, one of the renderings we have, we were looking at doing kind of a courtyard area. I think we still want to do a courtyard area, kind of a common area for a lot of the tenants. Also kind of connected to the Rock Creek Trail, and just a common space that people can kind of congregate. With the fitness across the street, the trail just makes some sense to have kind of an end cap. That being said, after talking with the tenants, oh, thank you so much. After talking with tenants, every parking space is absolutely needed in this shopping center. There is no doubt about it. I was there Saturday at Campesinos for lunch, and almost every spot was completely full. And so when we talked to tenants about kind of what we're thinking, they were concerned about losing these spaces, and rightfully so, after seeing it a few different times. So we can go ahead and flip to the next one. Again, just talking about some of the vision, you can kind of see we want to do a bunch of blade signs kind of throughout around the whole building. There's no doubt a lot of the enhancements, the landscaping is going to be fantastic. I think that's going to be a win-win for the tenants, and for us, and for future tenants that we know that would find this area very, very appealing. But again, losing these spaces, we after discussions is going to be very difficult. We do think there would be a common area kind of to the south side. There's already some open space here that we could program and have a nice area for people to congregate. We can jump to the next one here. And again, highlighting that central area. You know, there's no lighting around the facade on those columns. We think we could take the, and that this thing's built very, very well. So it's not easy to get that lighting, but we think putting that lighting kind of around the facility with these blade signs can really just do a nice job of sprucing it up and updating the whole facade. The Mission Mart logo, we want to change that a little bit, make it look, you know, a little more new age. The same with the large monument sign that's on the far eastern side of the property. I love the brick that's there. I don't think that, you know, some retail projects you need to change a lot, but in this case, that stone and those columns is very, very unique and we think has a really nice look to it. We do think it could be updated a little bit and still try to highlight the central area of the shops. We can jump to the next slide. So kind of what we're looking at from a cost improvement perspective, and these are numbers that we have from a general contractor. Roof repairs, that's a big one for us. There's no doubt those roofs need updated significantly. Facade upgrades, you can see a little over $1 million. Common area upgrades, parking lot repairs, upgrades, and then interior and HVAC repairs. And those, you know, those collectively, those improvements end up being a little north of $3.5 million for this property. What we are requesting would be a consideration of a 1% CID. You know, we toyed around with 2%, but we're sensitive to the tenants that are there. We think 1% pay-as-you-go structure would hopefully be something that when the time is right, council would consider. So that's just a little bit of a overview of the project. We're excited about it. We love the area. We're invested in the area, and we think that the existing tenants there are very, very special and can be enhanced by these upgrades. But we also think there's a few areas on the site right now, especially on that south side with activating it with the lanes, where we can bring some pretty exciting new tenants to Mission that would, I think everybody would be excited about. So that's it. That's path forward. Any questions anybody might have?
Thank you. First, are there any questions or comments from the public? I don't see any in person. Are there any online? No. Any questions from the committee? Two down there, Ben and Debbie. Or Debbie in first.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I know you'll probably go through this as you move down the road, but
Yep.
are you looking right now at potential rent increases for the tenants that are currently there?
You know, we're not looking at a lot of rent increases right now. That's not our objective. We're looking at ways we can be more efficient with common areas to not drive those triple nets. There are some leases that are expiring in the near future that are significantly under market. We do feel like there's a better use for some. There's also, I think the big thing is there's a 9,300 square foot vacancy on the south side. There's another 12,000 feet right next to it that is not going to renew come June. So that puts us, that's 21,000 feet right there where we have an opportunity to do some pretty exciting programming.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Hey, Banks.
Hey, how are you? Yep, not a problem.
This is a property that I was hoping would start to see a little more energy with your work at the lanes and the multifamily stuff. So it's just, I think, kind of poignant that you're trying to tackle this yourself. So great stuff. I like what I see here. I think for me, when it comes to kind of a CID for a sort of single property owner with commercial tenants, what I'm worried about is just making sure we're not, like Debbie said, making it harder on the tenants that are there, that the vacancy rate down, which I'm sure is your goal as well. So,
Yep.
Yeah, for me, I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing because you're improving the pedestrian experience right now. And I know the tenants are sensitive to parking, but as somebody who accesses this site a lot by bicycle and on foot, and you've got hundreds
Yep.
of new residents that are probably doing the same. I doubt they're going to
Yep.
drive over. I hope not.
Hopefully not.
I would hope that those tenants can be helped to see the light to some degree, that improvements to the pedestrian experience over there are very helpful. And we've already got work going on with Mart Way, and you've got some things in the renderings, but I really want to put a tag on that people that shop on foot do exist, and I think it's easy to forget that they exist. And not to mention, we have a couple of establishments selling alcohol by the drink here, so just having everybody drive in from wherever isn't necessarily the public
Yep.
policy I like to set either. Other than that, I'm loving what I'm seeing. My 2 cents is that really the CID in this case is sort of it's kind of the business of you and your tenants, since again it's a single owner parcel that's leased out. So yeah, that said, just the sensitivity to the existing tenants, and I think like you've mentioned, with vacancies there, really the only place to go is up. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm a fan of this. Just want to make sure
Thank
the
you.
details are all there.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, before I forget, so Mission Mart does not include sort of the FedEx and Domino's piece, right? Is
That's
that right?
correct.
And there's not really any opportunity to work with them in this?
There's not.
I
There
mean,
was,
honestly, the worst of the pedestrian experiences down there, and Laura knows
there
I'll
was
beat
some
that.
conversations early on, but there's not.
People ask me all the time, why there's no crosswalk over there, why can't I? No. Great. I
Yep.
got nothing to tell you.
Sheffield, go ahead.
I had just a quick comment.
Yeah.
I love that you all are trying to kind of reintroduce that third space in the commons area, and I hope that works out, given, as we were mentioning, like all of the driving traffic that makes its way there. Is that something that you are working through with the current businesses there as well? Like, they're interested in this. Obviously, it would be a
Yep.
benefit if there were a third space that their customers could use as well.
Yeah, there's a balance, right? And by the third space, you're talking about the courtyard kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a balance between creating that space, but not losing parking that they feel is necessary for their business. And so we're extremely sensitive to that, because this retail shop it's grandfathered into some parking requirements that are a little lower than most retail options. And so every spot we're extremely sensitive to. And so if we can find a balance between the two, we want to see some sort of little central area for tenants to be able to hang, or the walkability, and engage with the lanes across the street and Mart Way and everything that's going on that street. And so we're going to do something. Just the size of it is going to vary. Everything you've seen, those are all things that we're going to end up doing. The courtyard might shrink a little bit. That would just be the only thing.
I've got another comment and then, yeah, Debbie. Yeah, regarding the parking, if you haven't done this already, I would encourage just an observational study on that lot. I think there's a big difference between busy and full. As someone who, I am too far away to walk, unlike Ben, but I'm there all the time and I drive. I've gone all times of day, night, evening. You can always find a spot. Is it always right in front of the store that you're looking for? No, but I've never gone and had to leave because I can't find a spot.
Yeah.
So I would challenge the assumption that we need every single spot. I think busy is great. I am suspicious that it is completely full and at capacity all the time. I would encourage some kind of study to take a look at that. Oh. Go ahead.
Yep, go.
You know, we'll get through this, I know, but tenant wise, we would really appreciate having some more sit-down restaurants. If you get to that point, we're losing some and we
Yeah.
just don't have that many sit-down. And I hate for people to have to leave this community to go out for dinner.
Agreed. Yep.
you.
No, we love the two main restaurants that are the sit-down restaurants that are there. And we think there may be an opportunity to add something maybe a little further down, because that's where you do run into a parking issue, is right in that central area where the Peanut there's no doubt the Peanut's always packed. But we don't want to scare people away. And then also, you know, I would make the argument that you may go there all the time, so you're familiar with it. But one thing you like to see also is people coming from outside to come to your town to hopefully park easy and not have to try to navigate and find that space that may be 150 yards away from, you know, an establishment that they want to hang out and, you know, have dinner or lunch with their family out. So there's definitely a balance there for sure.
Well, yeah, I'll take the opportunity to be clear. I want that problem, not the other one.
Yeah, and I think what Banks is referring to, and we've heard this before, is what we understand about parking and our desire for parking. And when you're trying to attract or retain retail tenants in particular, and what they sort of demand as a part of that is where that balancing act
Mhm.
comes in.
Yeah.
And I think really if we can continue to activate that Martway corridor and you see more pedestrian traffic, I feel more comfortable parking a longer distance away if there are people on the street. Right? We talk a lot about that when we look at walkability and that activation of the street. And part of that is just that safety and comfort factor, and seeing other people out and about and saying, hey, I can do that. One question I haven't asked you through all of our conversations is, are you also, as a part of this acquisition, though not in the CID district, acquiring the parking across
Yes.
Martway?
The
Okay.
overflow peanut.
The
parking.
overflow peanut
Yes,
parking. Okay.
absolutely. That is a very important piece of the puzzle, is between the blind broker and their extra vehicles and the peanut, and hopefully maybe somebody that goes above the peanut, that would be really exciting for the area. That parking lot is very, very important. And but we do think, and there's some easements on it, as you know, with Johnson County wastewater and backing up and all that stuff, but we do think there's a better way to lay that parking lot out. So you could probably add about 10 to 12 spaces. Right now it's just all on the sides. I think that you could probably lay it out a little more effectively, but yes, that would be a part. Yes.
Good.
Hey, Banks. Yeah, I'm also really excited to see this project and see investment in this part of town. You know, with the CID, the sales tax CID, the only real financial risk to the city would be if the increased sales tax deters consumers. And so I'm just kind of curious about those tenant conversations you had. It sounds like maybe in your analysis, you thought it could even be 2%, but tenants were kind of pushing back and saying 1%. So I was just, you know, what does the market say about consumers, you know, willingness to pay the 1%?
Yeah, you know, most consumers don't realize it. The 2%, just in my mind, just is a little aggressive. That's more of a personal preference probably than anything. But I think in this case, given the scope of work, et cetera, the 1% is justified. I also think that hopefully the tenants and go, you know what, these little upgrades and landscaping and all that stuff is going to help my business. And the 1%, you know, additional sales tax is more than justified by the work that's going to go in and having a fresher look and updates that'll hopefully drive more people to come visit the business, you know?
Is that what you were hearing in the conversations you had, or were there any
We-
concerns expressed by the
No, we haven't
tenants, or-
we haven't heard concerns, but we haven't during our initial conversations. I didn't want to throw something like that in the middle of an introductory meeting. That probably wasn't the appropriate time, but we will.
Great. And then, yeah, I would just echo the other concern that was raised by some council members about rents, I think. Because you sort of said two things, both that you're not looking at increases, but then also that there are rents expiring that are significantly under market. And so, I worry about pushing out established tenants, especially if you're looking at a public-private partnership to fund this, that it not be funded, kind of on the back of the long-term tenants.
Yeah, I want to be clear that the tenants that I would be referring to are people that would be leaving anyway. So there's some businesses that are not going to be renewing, and we know that. And so we feel like there's an opportunity there to bring in some fantastic complementary tenants that we think will lift everything.
There are no other questions. I'll just step to the podium and kind of speak to the rest of the process, kind of what it looks like from here, if that's all right.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
And the real expert, Mr. Wempe with Gilmore and Bell, is here in case I don't get this correct. But so we wanted to introduce this to you all this evening. We've had quite a few back and forth conversations with Banks and his team. And they would be ready to submit their formal CID petition. There are statutory requirements for a public hearing. It's been a while since we've created a community improvement district. But there's public hearing requirement and there's public notice that is provided, even though there is single or would be single ownership of the property within the district. So we would anticipate bringing forward at your January meeting, the resolution to call the public hearing. The objective would be to get through this process, ideally, if the council were ultimately to approve the Community Improvement District or CID, that we would do that by the end of March. So the CID consideration process is much less intensive than TIF or some of the other incentives. So it's a more condensed process so that a sales tax could become effective July 1 of 2025. So that's kind of the timeframe that we would be working on. Obviously, we have not shared financials. Mr. Floodman referred to a pay-as-you-go CID, which would mean that they would certify CID eligible expenses and we would pay those out as revenues were received. We have not yet done kind of the larger financial analysis, which will be one of the next steps in this process with Mr. Kimmel and Ellers to look at sort of where, what we think actually could be generated by the 1% CID in this case, but there are obviously no bonds that are issued or anything like that. So it sort of pays out over a 22-year period. So one of the distinctions between Community Improvement District and a tax increment financing district is the additional 2 years on the Community Improvement District. So all of that work will be happening in the coming months, and we'll be back before you in January to pass a resolution to call the public hearing for February, at which time then we would hopefully have all the rest of the details ironed out. And then ultimately, if the council were to approve the CID, you would consider a development agreement similar to what we look at with a TIF incentive or a tax abatement that would then capture all the terms of the partnership that we would be entering into. Be happy to answer any questions. Did I miss anything? Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the info and the presentation. We will move on to action items tonight. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the November 6th Finance and Administration Committee meeting minutes were included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Recommend acceptance on consent.
Consent? Yep, consent. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of a funding agreement for the Mission Mart CID from Laura Smith.
Mr. Fleming left the room before we got to the money part, but I think you all are familiar with whenever we enter into a conversation around the use of incentives with the developer, we ask them to enter into a funding agreement with us, which requires them to escrow $10,000 initially that cover the cost of the financial analysis, any work that bond counsel would do. If we spend more than that, they replenish that escrow. And this is a funding agreement that that we would put in place that would allow us to recapture those costs. So the goal of that is really that we don't want our constituents and taxpayers to be funding the work that we're doing on behalf of the developer. We want the developer to be paying for that. So this is a funding agreement that commits them to escrow those funds and replenish them as necessary as we go through the evaluation of the community improvement district. Non-refundable if it doesn't eventually get approved. Just covers those costs.
Any public questions? No? Any questions from the committee? No. Can I get a recommendation on this item?
I recommend acceptance and consent.
Okay, consent. Thank you. Our third action item this evening is for consideration of legislative priorities for the 2025 legislative session from Justin Carroll.
Good evening. So if you recall, this item we last brought forward in November as a discussion item to just kind of review last year's platform and take feedback from you all on some changes. And so that's essentially what you have in front of you now. So nothing too crazy different in here. I would just call attention to the couple things that we did change since that meeting in November. The first one is at the bottom of the third page of the document, the zoning. Beefing up that language for that section as well, just to kind of stress the importance of the leaving that item under local control. The other change from when we last discussed was on page 5, talking about transit, and Councilmember Chociej had some comments about that. So the additional red line you see in here was just while focusing, the roads and bridges, the bricks and mortar transportation is important. This was just highlighting keeping the other modes of transportation and thinking about that in terms of the bigger holistic picture when it comes to transportation. And then the last piece was, I believe it was Councilmember Loudon wanted just the highlights on the very last page. This is the same language, but at the top, we just call out now as an actual item, the unhoused populations. It used to be merged with the housing needs. It used to be one big paragraph. We just call that issue out separately. So those were the only couple of few changes from the last meeting. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the public? No? Ben, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it occurs to me I forgot about this one until just this very moment, but I always like to mention under our climate action and energy policies, the state sort of preempts us from making legislation about the source of energy in new construction, whether they can install natural gas, that kind of thing. I think that's another one that falls neatly under home rule and local control as well as climate policy. Doubt that one's ever going anywhere, but I would love to in the future. I don't think we need to hold this process up. Just remember that that's one that some places that are doing a little bit better on climate action legislation have been able to sort of take by the horns. Is we don't want to install a bunch of new natural gas capacity, that kind of thing. And right now, that's a big local control speed block for us.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I do not see any. Can I get a recommendation on this, please?
Recommend consent.
Consent? Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Oh, you're stuck with me
Oh,
for
are
a
you
little while.
myself?
so,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, stick on up there. Our fourth action item this evening is for consideration of the renewal of the city's KERIT workers' compensation coverage, also from Justin Carroll.
So I think we're going to start the run of kind of perfunctory year-end items, the house cleaning, keeping items and so forth. So the first one, yes, this is our renewal for our workers' compensation with KERIT, the Kansas Eastern Regional Insurance Trust. I do want to note if you're on the action item page, so I goofed this and I will update it. So the amount that is in the table is the correct renewal amount for 2025. So $71,387, which is a nice decrease from this current year's premiums. And so and as you can see in that table there, this has been a long-going effort for the city to improve that and get our experience modifier and just our overall claims and losses way down. And so that is what you're seeing there reflected in the table. And it's again, it's that modifier. And then we actually even got a dividend distribution this year, so a refund essentially of almost $10,000. So it is absolutely trending in the right direction, and a lot of hard work has gone into that. And so, yeah, that's just kind of the renewal for next year, and happy to answer any questions.
Super. I don't see any from the public, any from the committee. Yeah, great. None, so I'll take a recommendation.
Yeah, taking the amendment to the recommendation with the 71,387 instead of what's printed, I recommend acceptance on consent.
Can I disagree just a little bit? I wonder if we should put it on regular just because this is such a lengthy years-long process to get it to this state. It might be nice to just let folks know that like we're really trying to be good stewards of that funding.
Regular agenda.
Oh, we do when we disagree on where that goes now, so.
Only takes
I
one
think just
person.
This, yeah.
Yeah.
So regular it is, yeah.
Literally anybody in the room, I think, public or.
The regular agenda, thank you. Yep. Okay, let's keep moving forward. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of the renewal of the city's property and casualty / general liability insurance, also from Justin Carroll.
Okay, so this one's a little more convoluted, and I will blame Eric with CBiz, and I'll throw him under the bus if you have specific questions. But so this is going to be a change this year. So this is the usual renewal. The city has been with Travelers for our property and casualty since 2019. They have really kind of been the only entity in the ballgame for municipal coverage for a while. There is, as noted in the write-up, there was a new entity that was willing to come in, and they were going to do just property, but they're trying to start writing that in the municipal book of business now. And so we did obviously a full renewal quote from Travelers. That came in at $297,000. So that was about a 28% increase over our 24 premiums. So then that new entity was known as Chubb. So we got a quote from them just on the property, and then the rest of it would have been under Travelers. So that did achieve some savings. You see it was the 272, 174. The monkey wrench in this was Midwest Public Risk, which is a pooling entity. And it's got entities on both the Kansas and Missouri side as an insurance pool. We did solicit on the advice of CBiz. We hadn't had them look at it in a while, so we asked them to solicit a quote from them as well. And it actually came back pretty favorable. The quote itself is slightly higher than the renewal between Chubb and Travelers. So it came in at 286. So it was a little higher, but there are some substantial kind of benefits to moving to the pooled coverage with NPR. And most notably, that is just with wind and hail. The deductible we were looking at that has just been going up and up with Travelers or Chubb. It was going to be a $250,000 minimum for an occurrence. And the switch now over to NPR for that coverage takes that down. It's a $25,000 deductible. So it's pretty substantial difference there, which I think is more than offsets the marginal increase in premium if there was to be an incident and a claim filed. The other thing to note, just kind of some wonkiness about switching to NPR as a pool coverage is sometimes talk about like the city carrying an umbrella policy just to make sure we're fully insured up to that amount's been 5 million in the past. We had our standard occurrence coverage and then an umbrella policy on top of that. We still have $5 million in incident occurrence coverage. It's just all rolled up now with NPR and the pooled coverage. So it's kind of a technical difference, but if you are an insurance nerd and thumb through the packet, didn't see an umbrella policy, that is why. Trying to think just kind of some other pieces of that. And then this will kind of change our renewal period. So NPR renews on 7/1 is their renewal period, but they have already assured us that when that period comes around, there won't be any rate increases. So we will have to bring this forward again and at the June meeting to have that ready in place for July, but they've already guaranteed no rate hikes on that front. But that will require, we'll have to pay 1.5 times the annual premium this year because we're switching into kind of a new coverage policy for 2025. So with that, I would note another common question with this would be other entities, if you're curious. So it's a lot of our friends and neighbors. So Roland Park, Fairway, Merriam, and then some Edwardsville, Gardner, Bonner Springs are kind of some of the areas around here that are part of it just on the Kansas side. And there's a whole host of others on the Missouri side. And then lastly, kind of underneath all of this is we do have cyber coverage. The CBIZ did go out to market again and got a couple pretty competitive quotes. So we're sticking with our current provider, but they chopped that almost in half on that. Actually, I think a little more than half on the premium. And some of the coverages within the cyber got a little improved as well. So so what you're doing, so what this action item will be is it'll be the first step is the property casualty for the 141,000, which will be the period of January 1 to June 30. And then the other piece for the entire year will be the cyber. And then we'll get that synced up moving forward once we kind of make the switch, and it'll be kind of more of a mid-year renewal. So with that, I would stand for questions, but I also, Eric with our broker CBIZ is here. And so he can, if there's questions specific to the market or how a pool works or anything, I would gladly defer to him.
Thank you, Justin. I don't see any public comments, questions. So any from the committee? Ben?
You're not gonna get enough of them, are you? Yeah, so just a couple questions. Does this going to this sort of pooling entity, does this change any of the burden on staff in terms of how we do claims and handle that kind of thing?
No, so as it stands right now, we still have CBIZ as our broker, so they kind of shepherd all that stuff and monitor that and everything. They track that, run the traps, et cetera. So they're still kind of there as the intermediary for us on that front.
Excellent. And then I assume with the mid-year renewal, we're all good on cash flow on that front for that budget, having to do an extra 50%. So, okay.
Yep.
Cool.
I'm not an insurance nerd, but my wife is.
Uh-oh.
So I do know that with the likelihood of wind damage in this area going up and up, it's nice that we were able to get the deductible for that to be
Yeah,
so low. So
yeah,
Great
that
to hear.
lowering that exposure is pretty huge. Yeah.
yeah, very nice. Any other questions or comments? Nope. I'll take a recommendation on this one.
Yeah, regular. agenda.
Regular, okay. Regular agenda on this one. Looks like more of the Justin show. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of amendments to the 2024 budget, also from Justin.
I don't know if this one or Laura's are more perfunctory. I guess this one might not be. It's got a few more numbers. So anytime, when we go through the budget process, we have to do all those notices and the public hearings and everything like that. And part of that is establishing our expenditure maximums with our annual budget. And so earlier this year, when we did the 2025 budget, we did amend the 2024 budget with these new dollar amounts. And so you all approved all that as part of that budget process. But the technical piece of that is we still have to officially amend our 24 budget and hold the public hearing. So that's what this action item is. And these are all, it's not, it's 5 funds in the table on the write-up, but it's not the general fund. It's all, excuse me. It's our equipment reserve fund, our capital improvement fund, street sales tax fund, parks and rec sales tax fund, and the Cornerstone Commons CID fund. And obviously with the capital improvements, that's just kind of a cash flow issue from like bond proceeds, projects that started last year, rolled into this year, et cetera, which again, it was part of the budget process from earlier, but now this is just the technical cleanup to account for that. We're actually expending all those funds that we knew we would in this current year. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
I think still no public questions. Any from the committee? Nope, none on this. Can I get a recommendation on this one? Consent? Consent it is. Thank you, Justin. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of adoption of the 2025 budget from Laura Smith.
Mine are way more boring. And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I will just kind of give you the rundown on 8 and 9, even though you'll need separate recommendations. So as you all know, we go through the formal process, this year was in August, sometimes it's in September, of adopting our annual budget. And those are timelines established via state statute that we're required to meet in order to communicate our intentions for setting a mill levy to go to the county clerk so that property tax bills can be calculated. So you have already adopted the budgets. We go through, at the end of the year, these two ordinances, one which will adopt a final budget and a second which will allow me or authorize me as the city administrator to spend according to that budget. And essentially what that does is keeps us from bringing appropriations reports to you every single month. Councilmember Kring may remember times where every month we couldn't pay vendors or get any dollars out the door until the council had actually authorized all of those. It's not an efficient process at all for the way that we do business. So this allows us, obviously, to sort of streamline that. Also, you have in place the expenditure authority limits by council policy. So my authority was raised earlier this year from 10,000 to 30,000 for a budgeted item. Anything over 30,000 or non-budgeted still comes to you, even if it is included in the budget. So these two things really are administrative, help us keep our vendors and providers happy, particularly because we're only meeting once a month, as opposed to many other cities which are meeting every couple of weeks. So those are those two items. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I still don't see any public questions or comments, so any from the committee on either of those audit items, the adoption of the budget or the spending authority? I do not see any questions. Can I get a recommendation for those separately? First, for the adoption of the 2025 budget, please. Regular. And also on the 2025's budget spending authority.
Recommend acceptance on non-consent, since we'd have to adopt the budget to spend according to it.
Okay. So regular agenda for both is what I'm hearing. Okay. Let's see. I don't want to skip anything here. Our next action item this evening is for approval of 2025 cereal malt beverage renewals from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Yes, it's a mouthful and I say it wrong every single year. So as many of you know, every year our retailers in Mission who sell cereal malt beverages, so beer lower than 5% alcohol by volume, are required to get a state license. The license is for the calendar year, so January 1st through December 31st. We have several retailers who have applied for renewal of their CMB licenses. Avaludo's, Casey's Retail Company, Hy-Vee Grocery, Hy-Vee Convenience Store, Natural Grocers, Prairie Sailor, Quick Trip, and Target. All of them have submitted their applications and their fees. A background check will be run by the police department on those either owners or managers at each entity. And then subject to the background check being satisfactory, the licenses will be issued through me before the end of the year. And then they have to have that in order to get their first delivery of 2025. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Still see none from the public. Any from the committee? Nope. Can I get a recommendation on this one?
Recommend we take this to council, regular agenda.
Regular on this one? Okay.
Excuse me.
There- Okay, consent agenda on this one. No, you're good. Everybody. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's see. Our next action item this evening, approval of recommended funds for the county's Drug and Alcoholism Council, also from Robin.
Thank you. Yes. So each year, Mission adds to the special alcohol tax fund that funds services and programs to the county by the Drug and Alcoholism Council. So by state statute, the state imposes a 10% liquor drink tax on any drink that is sold within the city by clubs, caterers, or drinking establishments. Those funds, 30% of them go to the state and 70% come back to the city or county where they're collected. The statute also, for our city's size, requires that a portion is allocated to the local jurisdiction, to the general fund, a third, to the special parks and recreation fund, a third, and to the special alcohol tax fund, a third. that special alcohol tax fund supports programs with the principal purpose to combat alcoholism and drug abuse, or to help with treatment for people who are alcoholics or drug abusers. So funds estimated for mission in 2025 are 390,000. A third of that, 130,000, will be proportioned to the special alcohol tax fund, and 65,000 would go to the Drug and Alcoholism Council for distribution to agencies that they receive grant funding requests from each year. The Drug and Alcoholism Council is a program supported by the United Community Services of Johnson County. They take grant proposals from several different nonprofits within the county each year, and then they allocate funds that come into them through all different municipalities to fund those grant requests each year. So this would be for your consideration, missions allocation to the 2025 special alcohol tax fund as part of those drink tax dollars that we receive.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from, yes, Mayor?
Ryan? Yeah, I just have one quick question that, just to clarify, the staff recommendation is the $65,000 budgeted amount. Is that right?
That's correct. 65,000 is what we would recommend to be allocated through the county.
Any additional questions or comments? Does not look like it. Can I get a recommendation on this one?
Recommend acceptance on consent.
Consent? Perfect. Our next action item is for the approval of recommended funds for United Community Services of Johnson County's Human Services Fund, also from Robin.
Yes, thank you. So as part of the United Community Services of Johnson County, they're an independent nonprofit that coordinates and supports initiatives and programs that provide human service needs in the county. So sort of similar to the idea of the alcohol tax funds, the Human Service Fund is a group that is throughout the county. They take grant proposals from nonprofits that help support residents in the county, and then they allocate funds based on what is given to them by municipalities to help fund those grant requests each year. So this year, the Human Service Fund asked for $10,500 contribution from Mission, which is the same as what we allocated last year. And those funds are then taken and combined with other funds to fund the grant requests from their partnerships. So our recommendation is a $10,500 allocation for 2025.
Thank you. No comments from the public. Any from the committee? I do not see any. Recommendation, please. Consent? All right. You're Robin. Our final action item tonight is for consideration of a contract award for facility custodial services from Justin Carroll.
Alrighty, so this was an item that kind of shocked us a little bit, and I'd already done all the legwork before the bid opening with the price that came in, so we'll go ahead and go over it anyways, even though it actually came in under $30,000. So quick background, the city contracts out custodial services to clean City Hall, both the main floor and the police station, and then the kind of front of office of the Public Works building. So we last went out for this service in 2021. And so we were just at that point in time where the contract ended and went out for bid. And as you can see below, the bids came in and we had a new low, which was pretty sizably underneath the two other amounts, but we did the reference checks and everything kind of came back good. And so to be quite honest, the service with the current provider was, I'll just say, perfectly fine. Nothing super special or anything like that. And so we thought with the good references and everything like that, we were going to award to the low bidder on this item. And so that would be for Metro Point Services LLC in the amount of $28,140. And then that would take effect, well, the January 1, but they won't be in here on that day. So January 2nd, we would switch over to this new provider. So happy to stand for questions.
Great. Any questions from the committee?
I'm getting a nice back and forth going, and
Debbie.
Do we have any referrals from other cities for this particular firm?
So I did ask that specific question. They just got awarded the contract for the city of Parkville, but I think it's kind of the similar situation. It has not started yet, so they didn't actually list them there. They got selected, but they haven't started providing that service yet. Sorry, go ahead.
Who did we use the last contract?
It was, Citywide was the company. I think the most reassuring reference was, it's tension envelopes, which is the
Mm.
big center over there and the Crossroads, that big building, and they've been with at least 6 months or so, and they've had nothing but glowing reviews on everything. So
Well, I appreciate you doing referrals and background checks. Security for custodial company, I mean, people we don't know coming into our buildings when no one's there. I mean, that's a real trust issue, and I'm glad that you looked into it and we can put forth some trust and assurance that city will be safe.
yep, no, absolutely. And actually, matter of fact, yeah, they have to come in and especially for that PD access, it's very stringent and we have to subject them to, they have to do the background, the fingerprints, and they have to do a little security thing and et cetera. So yeah, definitely want to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed for them.
Thanks, Justin.
Super, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Looks like no. I will take a recommendation, please.
Recommend consent.
Consent, thank you. We do not have any discussion items tonight. Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for us tonight? It pleases us. It is now 7:23, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting for the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.
Excellent. This is my first time doing this. So here we go. It is 7:23 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, up there, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we can call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. And please remember that your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, over here, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you do make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org, and you can contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 if you have any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, will you please call the roll?
Hayden Chomposi.
Here.
Ryard.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Schmid.
Here.
Here.
Right. Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item that is not on our agenda? And if so, limit your comments to 3 minutes. No one. Excellent. All right. So we do not have any items coming forward from the Planning Commission or public presentations. So we will move into our action items. Our first action item this evening is for the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the November 6th Community Development Committee meeting were included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Recommendation.
Recommend acceptance on consent. Do you want to take some? I'll let you take some.
No,
Okay.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll just spread it all around. Excellent. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of revisions to section 320 of the Mission Municipal Code related to parking of commercial and recreational vehicles from Brian Scott. He's got a long way to go.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kring will probably remember the days when the Finance and Administration Committee in December was all me. And so I just want to say thank you to Justin and Robin for taking a lot off my plate. So it gives me time to focus on the community development things, such as updating codes. So tonight's topic is an update to section 320.010, parking of commercial vehicles in residential areas, and section 320.020, parking of recreational vehicles in residential property of our municipal code. Every city has a section like this in their city codes. And it's always been kind of a controversial issue. I've been dealing with this probably for 30 years now throughout my career. And everybody kind of writes it a little bit differently. So I started off by kind of looking at what some other cities in the area are doing and quickly disregarded all of that. But I thought what we had was actually pretty good. It just needed a little bit of tweaking. And what, no pun intended, the driver behind this was actually the First Baptist Church. They were good enough to come to staff probably about a year ago. They have a 15-passenger van or 14-passenger van. It's a picture in your packet. And that currently is allowed to be parked on their property, which is in a residentially zoned district. But they cannot drive that anymore. Because that vehicle's so tall, there's a tendency to tip over. And so their insurance will not insure the vehicle anymore. And so what they've done is they've purchased a more traditional bus type of van, which is also photographed. There's a photograph of that in your packet. That is not allowed in a residentially zoned area because it has dual wheels in the back. So if you read the current code as it is, that would not be permitted. So we wanted to start by updating that. And then as we kind of went through it, we just started redrafting the language a little bit so it flowed a little better, made a little bit more sense. And then Jacob Turner, our city attorney, who represents us in a lot of cases in municipal court, wanted to make it a little bit more defensible in municipal court. So that was kind of the driver behind it, changing a lot of this. So really what we wound up doing was just adding a section at the end that permits those types of vehicles that are owned by churches or daycares or educational institutions, things that are all permitted in an R1 zoning district to have those types of vehicles. And then for section 320.020, this pertains to the parking or storage of recreational vehicles on residential property. And we've had a couple of cases now where we have found folks that are parking a vehicle in their driveway. This summer we had a family that had a kind of a Sprinter van, recreational type van, that they've been parking in the driveway for years, and nobody really noticed it until a resident kind of questioned it. We looked into it, and sure enough, that was actually a recreational vehicle. It was licensed as such. And then we had a case probably about 2 years ago, because we were still meeting in this room at that time. We had a family that had a small pop-up type camper van or trailer parked on the side of their property. It was a corner lot, so it was visible from the side street. So that kind of, we've been looking at this for a while and thinking that the provisions of this code need a little bit of polishing. And a lot of that polishing is around the definition of recreational vehicles. So the way it's currently written, has a weight limit of 8,000 pounds, and it's just generally very confusing. So we redrafted that to provide for a new definition. And that really just kind of zeroes in on exactly what a recreational vehicle is, and it takes away that weight provision. So recreational vehicles are motorhomes, including Class A, Class B, and Class C. And those are common references to the drivable type of recreational vehicles. So a Class A would be that big 45-foot motorhome that you kind of see cruising down the highway. The Class B would be a smaller motorhome. And then a Class C would almost be that Sprinter type van like we dealt with this summer. And then a travel trailers, folding campers, teardrop trailers, fifth wheels, et cetera. So I put a little clear definition around that. And then, and this is a little bit of, a subtle twist to all of this. We left the permit requirements as the code presently has them in place, because I thought that was a pretty good way of kind of keeping track of things. And then also providing an opportunity for those that would like, they're not able to park a vehicle behind the front line, to at least come to the city council and make their case for why they can't do that, and to seek permission from the city council to be able to park it on their driveway or some other area of their property where that's acceptable. The only thing we took out was the provision for the 1 year. So currently, one can come to the city council and seek a waiver from the regulation, but it's only for 1 year. And so we just removed that, really with the intent of making that at the discretion of the city council. If the city council wants to make it 1 month, 1 year, for the life of the family owns the vehicle, it's kind of up to the city council. But that process still remains in place, and that waiver would be a resolution outlining those conditions that would be approved by the city council. So I think that's really all the changes we made. So open up for any questions.
I have a quick question, and it may be in here and I missed it, but I see that we have considerations for if there is a contest to the waiver, like when the waiver is being provided. But is there recourse for anyone who comes back later and thinks to themselves, you know, that has been there for too long now, and we would like to contest the waiver at that point? Like, do we have any recourse built in there?
No, you're correct that when one seeks a waiver, we would notify all the property owners with 200 feet. Then they can file a protest petition, if you will, or protest with the city clerk. And then that would be presented to the city council at the time of the hearing, and that would trigger a majority vote on part of the city council. But if the city council seeks to go ahead and provide that waiver, there's not really a recourse at a later date, I guess, unless the city council want to come back and revisit that. And that's always possibly the pleasure of the city council to.
Yeah, I would think that you could, I mean, obviously in that situation, if there were some new facts that had arisen since the time the waiver was granted, but that would at least give us the opportunity to educate whoever was complaining about the rationale and the process. But yes, you could, it wouldn't trigger the same sort of requirements as the initial protest period or protest on the waiver, but you could revisit that based on new facts or new complaints.
See nothing from there. Yes, I see hands all.
But yeah, I think we'd want to think carefully about creating a reliance where we tell somebody we're going to waive the ordinance, the code, and then go back and pull it out later when they've, I don't know, poured a driveway and put a whatever, you know, that could be a sticky situation, which is why it gives me a little pause to not have some kind of cap on the waiver. But I think you could get yourself conceivably into a situation where the city council, probably not this one, I'm guessing, but yeah, okay, here's a waiver for the life of the family that owns the vehicle, and then 30 years later, we're in a silly situation, and, who knows what could happen. So, I don't know, I'm hot and cold on giving full discretion to the council. I think it probably, in the end, is flexibility that's necessary, but it's flexibility that we could probably trip over if we're not too careful. I'm in favor of it. I think it makes sense. I think the biggest thing for me was the definitions that were based on weight. There's already plenty of vehicles you can go buy right now that you wouldn't think would be banned in the city of Mission, but you can't legally currently park in your driveway because they're over 8,000 pounds. The other one for me was the section 025 that we're adding about storing recreational vehicles on commercial property. I want to be careful that we don't prevent storing recreational vehicles at a storage facility. If we've overlooked that.
Yeah, that would require a special use permit storage
Okay.
facility.
Okay.
So we can make an allowance for that. Thank you for bringing that up. That was literally a last minute. We had a business owner call and
Yeah.
ask, can I store my boat on my property? And don't want to get into
Yeah, I was
that.
just thinking, I think most commercial parcels, we probably don't want boat storage, but I don't think universal ban on that is.
Yeah.
So I can think of some cases where you might want a garage or something,
Debbie, you had a question?
Yeah, you said the waiver time frame was 1 year.
Currently, it's 1 year.
So do they come back the next year and ask for it to be re-looked at again, or how does that work?
Well, we haven't had that, but the idea really, I think the intent currently in the code is that the family has 1 year to figure out what to do with the vehicle. Either sell it, store it somewhere, or if they're really married to storing on the property, maybe put their house up for sale.
Okay, so the document that supports that waiver is only good for that 1 year. So if it's
Right.
December to December, at the end of December,
Yeah.
do we start looking at enforcement or what?
Yeah,
what's the-
that's the thing is like that family that came this summer, we gave them a 1 year waiver to store their van
Right.
on their driveway. If we stick with the way the ordinance is currently written, I'd have to have a conversation with them in the spring about, hey, your waiver is coming up, it's gonna expire, what's your plans?
Okay, good.
I don't think it was ever really the intent that we come back every year and visit that again, which is why I suggest just taking that out completely and then having it at the discretion of the city council for however long you'd like to have it. And it may be on a case-by-case basis, like I say, maybe 1 month or a year or whatever you all decide you want to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, a recommendation on this one?
I recommend consent on this.
Excellent. Our third action item this evening is for consideration of a contract award for an on-call engineering, for on-call engineering consultants from Stephanie Boyce.
Thank you. So our contract with our on-call engineers is up at the end of this year, which is in just a couple weeks. So in October, we advertised an RFQ, request for qualifications, for firms seeking to identify qualified firms to assist the city with various engineering service. So the stuff that we're doing now, stormwater, roadway, traffic design, as well as some grant writing, development review support. We received an overwhelming response and obtained 18 proposals from various firms across the Kansas City metro area. Through a review process, we selected 6 firms to move on to the interview process. Those are listed below. Each of the firms demonstrated strong qualifications, experience, and expertise, making it a very competitive process and a very tough process because each one of the firms did bring some really great information with them. And so we narrowed it down to kind of a top 3. And through that, you know, they brought specialized skills and resources that align with our priorities and included items such as a dedicated grant funding teams that have the expertise in securing and managing grants, and not just grants, but other sources of funding. So they all had community engagement specialists that have proven ability to engage stakeholders effectively, and that comes into play when we have bigger projects that are coming online to kind of help us navigate that engagement. They had stormwater expertise, in-depth experience in watershed management and countywide 2D modeling, AI technology for pavement condition assessment, and dedicated parks and planning staff, which will benefit our team if needed. And so after careful consideration and thoughtful review, city staff recommends selecting Olson and Burns and McDonnell as our city's on-call engineer consultants. And together, these firms offer a combination of experience, innovation, and specialized expertise that best meets our current and future needs. And they will help support us in delivering high-quality engineering services and advancing our infrastructure projects and maximize resources that are out there for us. So the funding is allocated as part of our annual budget and will vary based on projects that we select them for. So we would enter into a master agreement with each firm and then offer or provide task orders for individual projects as we select them moving forward. So we're just seeking approval for to enter into contract with these two firms.
Thank you. Do we have questions from not here folks? Questions from here folks? Great. All right. Recommendation? Great. Sounds good. I think you also have our next item.
Yeah.
That item is consideration of an obligation of funds for the Johnson Drive Rehabilitation Project.
Thank you. In 2022, the City of Mission applied for some surface transportation block grant through the Mid-America Regional Council for the Johnson Drive Rehabilitation Project. This is federal funding administered through the Federal Highway Administration, and it supports various infrastructure improvements. This project specifically is taking place on Johnson Drive between Lamar and Metcalf. And we know that that's a vital 4-lane divided arterial road, and it serves as a regional east and west corridor for the city. It's been undergoing redevelopment, and it aims to enhance the corridor, improving connectivity and reducing traffic congestion. And the current infrastructure has aged and deteriorated. So we're looking at improvements that include pavement and curb replacement, stormwater enhancements, native plantings of trees, widening sidewalks, new streetlights, and a new traffic signal. And these obviously aim to improve our safety, our walkability, and overall usability for our residents and visitors. That grant is for $6 million, and so we need to obligate the remaining portion in our local match for the rehabilitation project. That's $5,010,000. That will be funded through our capital improvement project through debt financing, as well as anticipated contributions from the Johnson County CARS program. And so we're recommending the obligation of the funds and to execute the city-state agreement with KDOT. They're the ones who are administering the grant.
Great, thank you. Questions from the public by chance? Nope. Questions from the council? Yes, ma'am.
Do we know what the status is of the crosswalk between Riggs to the south? That, it seemed like it was in the next budget year.
Oh, it's always been in connection with this project.
Okay.
And so it is designed, and we are kind of refining the actual location based on, so the hawk signal, as opposed to a full traffic signal, does not typically occur at an actual intersection. And so we are looking at, based on other drives on either side of the street, where we think I think it's going to be slightly east. Of Riggs, but still that crossing. So once we get that sort of design finalized, we will come back and share that, but it will be installed as a part of this project.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I would just add too is that I think we've talked about this, and everybody's aware that we obviously can't cash flow a $12 million project. And so I have been working with Mr. Kimmel and looking at debt financing options for this. And I anticipate we will be back sometime in the first quarter of next year with a bond financing scenario and proposal for you all to consider, in part because the easement acquisition process is going to have to start in 2025. And we have about little over $1 million budgeted for that. So the cash flow issues start pretty quickly. We want to be able to make sure that we're able to facilitate that, but we will be bringing that back.
Just I just had a comment related to that point, because I know we have some folks who weren't here when we got the STBG funds, which is, those are on a reimbursement basis, right? We don't get that up front, so that's part of the
Correct.
cash flow problem.
Part of the cash flow is, yes, those are not deposited to us. We pay them out and then we get reimbursed over time. So trying to time that so we obviously don't issue more debt than is necessary. But I think the interest rates are looking more favorable, at least some preliminary scenarios that Bruce and I have talked about.
And that's an 80-20 split. So city's portion is 20%. But again, reimbursable. So each month we would submit a reimbursement to KDOT and they usually take about a month or so to pay that back.
I think I remembered, the area of like Johnson Drive and Broadmoor being kind of a utilities nightmare. Am I remembering that correctly? I don't know.
We are going to be releasing the plans to the utility departments here in the next month so that we can start that coordination.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like I remember the Broadmoor project really being held up by utilities and I'm reading this agreement, seeing all this, let's indemnify KDOT and the contractors for utilities damage. And I'm like,
Well, we'll look at that. I think there was a pretty significant AT&T vault, if I
Yeah.
remember. We'll have to go back and look at that. But
well, yeah, I assume we'll be engineering this to, well, a lot. But yeah, just wanted to call that out because I think that was a risk on a previous project that we maybe didn't see coming, and with that all falling on us in this agreement, that's just something I thought that we'd take extra care to look at.
the other thing that we're waiting on is, I think we've mentioned that KDOT is electing to make repairs to the Johnson Drive Metcalf Bridge as opposed to proceeding with a realignment and reconstruction of that bridge that didn't match our long-term goal and vision. And so they have not yet, or at least they hadn't about a month ago, signed the agreement with the consultant to design that. So we're in pretty continual contact with KDOT to make sure that we understand when those repairs are going to take place and how that's going to interact with the work that we'll be doing along Johnson Drive.
Questions or comments? All right, can I get a recommendation?
To the regular agenda, I'd say.
Great, sounds good. Our fifth action item this evening is for consideration of a contract renewal for mowing services, also from Stephanie Boyce.
Thank you. Last one. So we are just looking at approving a renewal and extension for mowing services with Kansas Land Management for 2025 in the amount of $85,625. So since 2010, the city's been contracting out the mowing services for parks, facilities, and other grounds just to optimize costs and public works staff time. We do over 60 acres of public green space. And it looks like, yeah, 60 acres, including parks, city-owned lots. We do a little of KDOT right away. They don't maintain it as much as it should be, so it gets a little bit out of control. So we do that once a month. And then parks are mowed weekly, KDOT areas are mowed monthly. This current contract was bid in 2023. KLM was awarded a one-year contract starting in 2024 with the option for annual renewals through 2027. There's a built-in annual increase capped at 3%, so they're asking for that. And that increase between last year and this year is $2,493. And looking at sustainability, I know in 2022, council asked for bid alternates for electric equipment. That equipment only included, I think, weed whacking and blowers, if I remember correctly. And so we did ask them to quote that this year. And they came back with an additional $30,000 annually for that equipment for your consideration, if that's something that the council is looking at, kind of taking that next step. That cost would be an additional $30,000. But our recommendation is to move forward with the contract and just seeking feedback on the electric aspect of it from council.
All right, thank you. Do we have questions from the public or from the council? Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you give a sense of how much of the equipment that they're using is not mowers essentially? I mean, is that going to be a significant amount of engine hours saved if we go to electric on just the sort of handheld stuff and not the mowers? Or is it kind of a nail, scratching the surface?
I would say it's just scratching the surface. The majority of it is mowing, and right now the electric mowers aren't even a
They're very
consideration right
expensive
now.
and very uncommon, yeah.
So yeah, it's just those handheld equipment, which are
I can't
doing the
imagine. on this-
finishing work.
Yeah, I can't imagine on this contract there's a ton of it, right?
And that cost is really to front load the equipment
Yeah.
because a lot of the companies out there don't have that in their inventory yet.
Yeah, I'll say, especially for the rest of the council, that I'm eager to jump on it, even for the small impact that it would have, just because small motors are some of the worst, small engines are some of the worst polluters out there. But I don't, if it's not the mowers, I don't see a lot on this contract really happening for 30 grand. I mean, I'm tempted to reach for anything we can get on climate action, but I think this is pretty vanishing.
Other thoughts or questions? All right, recommendations then.
Yeah.
Great. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Our final action item this evening is for consideration of a parking agreement for the park and ride lot on Martway Street from Brian Scott.
Parking, we got a theme tonight. Trying to think of where to begin with this. I should have brought this and put it on the screen, but on the second page of the action item, there's a photograph at the bottom of the page. And in the center of that photograph, it's kind of a big white rectangular building. That is the former Mission Bank building, or the Security Bank building, 5201 Johnson Drive. And that building is owned by the Brain Group. And to the south of that, there's kind of a large rectangular surface parking lot on Martway. And that is a part of the bank building property. So those two have always been together, and that property's always served as kind of an overflow parking for the bank building. And if you've ever driven by that property during the day, that lot's almost empty. There's hardly anybody that parks in that lot. And that's always been kind of the case. We've had a little bit of activity there the last few years because the contractors working on the Lanes apartment building have been parking in that lot. And they've been kind of using that sort of their staging area for the lanes. But there's very few people that park there. And then to the east of that, it's kind of marked off in the picture as sort of three odd-shaped rectangular boxes. Those three individual parcels make up the Mission Park and Ride lot. And nobody parks there. There's about 21 or so parking spaces that are completely underutilized. I have long had a suspicion that some of the folks that actually use the park and ride lot for the transit services probably park in the larger lot that's owned by the bank. And I've actually asked recently to get a sign on that lot, kind of a big 2x4 sign that we can put in the lot that more clearly designates that as the Mission Ride Park and Ride lot. And I start directing people to that lot. Because that parking lot that's owned by the bank is underutilized, they've been interested in selling that. And Sunflower Development Group, that is the developer behind the Lanes, that was Banks Floodman, who was here earlier this evening. has been interested in purchasing that lot for phase two. And so they've been kind of doing contract negotiations for the past year on purchasing that lot. One of the challenges has been parking. So if you'll remember, when we did the preliminary development plan about a year ago for the phase two, the lanes, one of the things we specified in the conditions is they have a shared parking access agreement with the bank property. And so they're currently kind of working out that deal, but that would essentially be 25 spaces during the day that folks that are visiting the bank property could park on the lanes, phase two. And then in the evening, folks that are visiting the lanes, phase two, or residents could park on the bank property. So they kind of reserve 25 parking spaces. They're changeable in those two lots. However, Andrew Brain, who owns the bank building property, feels like he still needs to have some additional parking. And what's really driving that is the tenants. The tenants feel like they need to have the additional parking for their employees and for their visitors. Waltz Tetrick, the advertising agency, is the primary tenant in that building now. And they've made some pretty substantial improvements to the building in the last few years. They've actually taken the ground floor of that building, which used to be the bank itself, and have turned that into kind of like studios for filming commercials and advertisements and things like that. So there's quite a bit of activity during the day, just with the studio area. So they would like to utilize some of that parking that's on the Mission Transit lot on Mart Way. So we've been negotiating with them for 15 spaces on that lot. It would be non-exclusive. So it wouldn't be just theirs. It would really be for anybody, public, transit ride users, or their employees or guests of the bank building property. In addition, we would go ahead and continue to maintain that, but they would do the snow removal. So we currently don't do snow removal on that property just because it's so underutilized. And it's just kind of the last thing for our crews. Our crews are so busy removing snow on the streets and public facilities like City Hall and the community center, they just don't really get to that. So our position was kind of, if you want to utilize that, fine, but do the snow removal. They agreed to do that. They also agreed to pay us $2,500 a year. And they agreed to an initial term of 3 years. And after 3 years, we just kind of monitor it to see what's it really like. Do we need to have this arrangement? Is parking kind of working out? So that's the purpose of that. Then the final provision is that during the World Cup events next summer, or 2 summers from now, excuse me, that week or 2 in July, when we're having all the World Cup events, they would not be allowed to park there. So that would be kind of freed up for transit users, or because we anticipate there'll be quite a few transit users parking there, getting on a bus and going to some World Cup event somewhere around town. So those are kind of the provisions of the agreement. The agreement's in your packet, obviously. Now for any questions?
Great. We will take questions from the public or from the council. Nothing from the public. Council, what you got? Of course.
So we're talking about the owner adding 60 spaces to the property surrounding the Waltz Tetrick building. That's going to have to be structured parking, isn't it? I mean, what else would they do?
I'm sorry.
Well, that would have to be like a vertical structure, wouldn't it? What else could they put there to get 60 spaces out of that?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. The bank owner will use some of the proceeds from the sale of the satellite lot to make improvements to the existing parking on the bank. And the improvements are going to primarily be on the east side of the lot. And
Okay.
that used to be the drive-through lanes for
Yeah.
the teller machines. And that's just kind of unused asphalt area now. So they're going to tear all that out and put it all in and restripe it.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then there's kind of a I wouldn't even call it a side street, more of a lane that kind of goes down the very east edge of that, and they're gonna put some parking along that east edge.
Yeah, that clears it up. Thank you, Brian. The other thing that I continue to think about with our park and ride lot is if anybody can give us 20 park and ride spaces anywhere as close or closer to the transit center, that's probably a decent parcel to develop. So I'm happy to wheel and deal with whoever.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? All right, we'll take a recommendation then.
Recommend acceptance on consent.
I agree. Great, excellent. Thank you so much. That concludes our action items this evening, but we do have one discussion item, an update on the implementation of the short-term rental licensing program, also from Brian Scott.
Okay, thank you. So the city council approved a short-term rental license ordinance outlining a program back in August of this year. And we made the effective date for January 1st of 2025. To give us some time to kind of work out the implementation details. The first thing that we did is we contacted Granicus, which is a software company that provides quite a few software programs that are kind of related to municipal services, one of which is short-term rental compliance. So we entered into a contract with them. It took a little bit longer to set up than I thought it would. So we finally kind of got that knocked out in mid-November. And we were able to get in there and generate a report. They had identified, this is kind of the number we've been working off, about 26 to 30 short-term rental licenses in our community, active licenses that are being, or not licenses, excuse me, short-term rental units that are being advertised on Airbnb or Vrbo or one of those providers. When we looked at the list, we realized a lot of those are kind of repeat addresses. So the number really comes down to about 14 or 15. And then most of those are new addresses that we've never seen before. So they're not addresses that are currently being caught in our current long-term license program. So out of the 14 or 15, there's only about maybe 3 or 4 that are not currently in our currently obtaining a license through a long-term rental program. So that's 10 new rental license holders out there potentially. Most of them, of that 14 or so, they're kind of a mix of homes that are owned by an individual or couple. There's 7 that are owned by like an LLC or a company like that. And there's 1 apartment building, or 1 apartment unit. So that's kind of what we've identified. We've also worked on putting information out on our webpage. So if you go to the webpage and you go to our rental license program, we'll now have a segment about the short-term rental licenses. We've also updated the online application to include short-term rental licenses. And we've also been doing some public notification through social media and then some other avenues that the city has for kind of getting the word out to the community. We are sending out notices to license holders this week, and we'll send out notices as well to the 14 or so that we've identified as short-term rental license, potential short-term rental license holders based on the Granicus report. And so we'll kind of get that out and start collecting those applications in the next week or 2. So that's where we're at.
Any questions or comments? Yes.
Do I remember correctly that we're paying Granicus a decent fee for that service?
Yeah.
And have you been satisfied with that service, that data they're providing?
Yeah.
Was it like 30,000, something like that? 3, okay. Well, even still for 3,000,
yeah.
it would be nice if they could pull 15 duplicates out of the list, but.
Yeah.
happy with it for the most part? Okay.
Add that question to Brian about how to go back and look in the Granicus contract, because I think we pay based on the total number, and we were estimating that we had about 30. But so I had asked him last week after I saw the list of, do we really pay for every listing that they find? There's probably some rationale because they're still doing the search and coming up with those multiple listings. So we'll get some clarification around that, but I think
Kind of a
Um,
minor thing, but yeah.
yeah.
I haven't had a chance
Hopefully
to
you're
slow
happy
down,
with
look at the
what-
No, I
contract,
know,
give
that's,
them a
yeah,
call.
we'll come back to that, but I think at least we have that information. And I think there's a lot of detail, right? So it will tell you the last time it looks like it was rented, the description. So it's comprehensive enough so that if we have somebody who wants to push back on us and say, I'm not offering a short-term rental, you can click on the listing and pull up the property and see all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, it actually goes so far as to take a photograph of the listing on the webpage, as though you were viewing it with a time, date stamp,
Right, yeah.
so you can,
Yeah, I think I'm fairly sensitive to the public perception that that's a cost-effective piece of software, so I think that's good to hear that they're working out.
I had a question and then one comment on the apartment. Do we know how many separate rentals they're trying to do from that apartment building, or is that information that Granicus is able to tell?
no, I don't know the number of units.
Okay, is that something where, based on where they're telling us it is, we could go in on like the Airbnb site and kind of see on the map, like what's listed? I'm just thinking because we had the provision about limiting the number, based on the type of property, how we would get at that.
Yeah, I think it's gonna really be, I don't know if we're gonna be able to rely on Granicus to give us that granular
Okay.
detail on the multifamily, because it's all kind of tied to one address at a building as opposed to a unit. But it's gonna really be at the time that they make application that we have to verify the number of units that are there. We're gonna be able to enforce that.
And then, now that we have the LLCs, it might be good to make sure that the provisions that we drafted make sense with what we're finding on the LLCs in terms of, are we adequately covering like common owners, that sort of thing. And then, sorry, I did have one more comment, which was I saw today in the post that Shawnee just revoked a short-term rental license. So it might be interesting to talk to their staff and kind of see how that all is playing out, but.
So it's been a few years, but I know at least when I was using Airbnbs a lot for work, they had to list every apartment as a separate listing on Airbnb. Don't know about the other websites, but
Yeah, I know when I've just searched on Airbnb before, I've seen multiple listings clustered together, and I suspect it would be whatever that apartment complex is that's hitting. But since we had the number restricted, figuring
Yeah,
out how to get
it's-
it, that might be important.
I know the building, it's 5601 West 58th Street, which is right our downtown, kind of the north side of Johnson Drive. It's the Maples, I think is the name of the building. And I think there may be more than one unit. I think they may have 2 units that they rent out. We've known about that for a while.
Are there questions or comments? Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for the Community Development Committee?
Year-end sort of housekeeping type of things. First of all, kudos to Parks and Recreation staff and to Robin and Kate for a very successful holiday lights and festive sites last Friday night. It's always a fun event, but the addition of the market vendors, I think, was very well received, and your feedback, at least preliminarily from the vendors, was very positive. So the weather cooperated, and that was nice to see, and the block across the street should be very grateful for the business that got generated for them that evening. Also, we had our annual Pearl Harbor Remembrance event on Saturday, which I think Penn indicated we had about 40 or so folks. The mayor made some comments, and just lots of ongoing appreciation for us still sort of remembering and honoring that event. Since the last time we've met, we've also had our Thanksgiving food distribution, which I think went really smoothly. I can tell you, and we'll give a full debrief after we get through December, but I think we looked at sourcing food from some different places and realized some significant savings as a result of that, which is a real positive. Tags flew off the trees here. I think we're down to 2 trees, few tags left, but a lot of gifts coming in, so I think we're in good shape. We've identified gift card preferences for food for the families. So that's all moving ahead, and the distribution for that will be December 20th. Just a reminder that City Hall is going to be closed on both December 24th and 25th for the Christmas holiday, and then again on January 1st. I did want to mention, I talked with several as we did agenda review, but just for on the record, the block project 5665 Fox Ridge, those action items were sort of absent from your agenda this evening. We are still negotiating sort of terms and trying to come to terms, really pushing them on the sustainability front, and we just weren't able to get to a place where we felt comfortable bringing forward a recommendation this evening. So in conversations with them, the public hearing that we opened in November was continued to the December 18th meeting. We will open that public hearing. Recommendation from bond counsel is that if there's any public that wants to speak, we take comments, but then we immediately continue that to the January meeting. So we're continuing to work with Block to see if we can't reach some resolution on that. And then also just, I know Robin has started including, we're into January and even February, I think, on last week's weekly calendar. But we are anticipating a sort of a visioning work session on January 22nd on the Gateway project. So this council, as you currently sit, have not really had an opportunity to look at and talk about what your vision is for that site. And we are in a unique position at this point because there is no zoning entitlement. Their preliminary development plan expired because construction didn't commence on the timeline in the development agreement. So we have no zoning entitlements. We have no incentives. So it's a little bit of a blank slate. And I think as we move forward and probably field interest from the development community, hopefully in the next year, we thought it would be important to start that conversation. So we've got that scheduled for January 22nd. Probably 6, I would say. We hadn't landed on that. Does anybody else have any other updates? No, it's a busy time of year. And so we will see you all back at City Hall next week, 7 o'clock. I think a lot of things went on consent, so it should be a smooth meeting to end the year.
You can't say it out loud, though.
Oh, I know, I probably jinxed it, but that's okay. That's okay. Well, without, I mean, I think without action on the block, we pushed all that till January, right? The chance that you have the public that comes to talk about that. I think that's all I have this evening.
Great, thank you so much. It is now 8:14 p.m. and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you, everybody.